Lena was a very small girl who lived in a quiet countryside village where life moved slowly, and people knew each other by name. Her house was tiny, made of old wooden boards, and the roof often leaked during the rainy season. Even though she came from a poor family, Lena always carried a bright smile on her face. Everyone in the village knew her as the little girl with a big heart. She did not have toys, fancy clothes, or much food. But she had kindness, and that was something she gave freely to anyone who needed it. She lived with her mother and father in a simple home at the edge of the forest. Her father worked long hours in the fields, and her mother washed clothes for other families to earn a small income. They had little, but they believed in sharing whatever they could. They taught Lena that helping someone in need was more important than having many things. Every day after finishing her small chores, Lena would walk along the forest path to fetch water from the stream. She liked going there because the trees were tall and beautiful, and she enjoyed listening to the birds sing. Sometimes, she would pick flowers growing near the path and bring them home to brighten their small table. She often talked to the animals she met on the way, even if they didn't understand her. It made her feel like she had many friends. On one calm afternoon, the sun was warm, and the air smelled fresh after a light rain. Lena was returning from the stream with a clay pot full of water, carefully balancing it in her small hands. As she walked, she hummed a soft tune. Suddenly, she heard a small sound, like a quiet whimper. She stopped and listened again. The sound came from behind the bushes near the path. Her heart fluttered with curiosity and concern. She slowly walked toward the sound and gently moved the branches aside. There, sitting on a small rock, was a boy around her age. He had dark hair and wore clothing that looked different from what people in her village wore. His clothes were made of soft, natural fabrics. His hair was tied back, and he had small wooden beads around his wrist. What caught Lena's attention most was the way his face showed discomfort, like he was trying hard not to cry. She also noticed that he was holding his foot, which looked swollen. Lena felt a wave of sympathy. She did not know who the boy was or where he came from, but she could see that he needed help. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly. The boy looked up at her. There was worry in his eyes, and he didn't answer right away. It seemed like he did not understand her language very well. Still, he tried to speak, but his words were unclear. Even without understanding, Lena could tell he was in pain. She carefully placed her clay pot on the ground and stepped closer. She lowered herself to the boy's level so she would not scare him. She pointed toward his foot and asked again, "Can I help you?" The boy hesitated but then slowly nodded. Lena felt relieved that he trusted her. She examined his foot gently. It wasn't bleeding, but it looked like he had stepped on something sharp or twisted his ankle. Lena knew she had to do something to make him feel better. She reached up to the scarf around her neck. It was old and worn out, but it was the only piece of cloth she could use. Without hesitation, she tore a piece from the end of the scarf. It didn't tear easily, and she had to pull hard, but she didn't mind losing a part of it. She carefully wrapped the cloth around the boy's foot. Her fingers moved slowly and softly, so she wouldn't hurt him. The boy watched her quietly, his eyes showing a mix of surprise and gratitude. When she finished tying the cloth, she helped him drink some cool water from her pot. He swallowed it eagerly. His face relaxed a bit, and a small smile appeared, shy but sincere. Lena smiled back. She could feel a warm feeling in her heart. Helping someone she didn't even know made her feel proud. She wished she could do more, but she was just a child, and she had only simple things. The boy tried to stand up. He balanced himself carefully and took a slow step. It hurt, but he could walk. Lena extended her hand to help him, and he accepted it. They walked a few steps together until he felt steady. The boy touched his chest and said a word softly. Lena guessed he was telling her his name, but she couldn't pronounce it. She tried repeating it, and the boy laughed gently, correcting her. Even though they didn't understand each other's language completely, they shared a tiny moment that felt warm and friendly. Before leaving, the boy turned toward the forest. Then he looked back at Lena and pointed to her scarf wrapped around his foot. He placed a hand over his heart to show gratitude. Lena nodded with a smile, telling him it was okay and he could keep it. Slowly, the boy walked away, moving carefully between the tall trees. Every few steps, he looked back, as if he wanted to make sure she knew he appreciated her help. Lena stood there watching until he disappeared into the forest. She picked up her clay pot and continued her walk home, but her mind was filled with thoughts about the boy. She wondered where he lived, who he was, and whether he had family waiting for him. She hoped he would reach home safely. When she reached her house, her mother noticed the torn scarf. Lena explained what happened, telling her mother about the limping boy and how she used her scarf to wrap his foot. Her mother listened carefully and then gently stroked Lena's head. She told her daughter she had done the right thing. "Helping someone in need is always good," her mother said with a soft smile. "You may be small, but your heart is big." Lena felt a warm glow in her chest. She went to bed that night thinking about the boy's shy smile. She didn't know his name properly or where he came from, but she knew something in her heart that the boy would remember her kindness. The next morning, the sky looked clear, and the breeze felt cool. Lena woke up early and stepped outside. When she walked toward the forest path, she noticed something strange. The ground had many footprints, more than usual. They were bigger than the boy's footprints, and looked like they came from many people walking in the same direction. She bent down and touched the dry marks on the soil. Some prints were fresh, and some were slightly older. Lena felt a little curious and a little worried. Who had passed by so early? Why were there so many footprints? She remembered the boy and wondered if he had told someone about his injury. Maybe a family member had come to look for him. She hoped he was safe. Throughout the day, Lena couldn't stop thinking about the footprints. Even when she did her chores, her mind kept wandering back to the forest. Her mother noticed her quiet mood and asked if everything was okay. Lena simply nodded, not wanting to worry her mother. She wasn't scared, but she felt something unusual was happening. As the sun began to set, Lena sat outside her house watching the birds fly across the orange sky. The wind rustled the leaves gently. Her father came home tired from the fields, and her mother prepared their simple dinner. They sat together, talking about the day. But Lena stayed quiet, lost in her thoughts. She wondered if she would see the boy again. She hoped his foot was healing. That night, she slept with the window slightly open, letting the cool breeze enter the room. The forest outside looked peaceful under the moonlight. Everything seemed calm, and nothing gave any hint of what would happen the next day. Lena had no idea that her simple act of kindness helping a boy she didn't even know would bring something extraordinary to her small village. She didn't know that the next morning would change the quiet life she had always known. She had no idea that her kindness would bring unexpected visitors who would leave the entire village in awe. But for now, she slept peacefully, unaware of the surprising events that were slowly making their way toward her home. The next morning arrived gently, with soft sunlight touching the small village. Birds sang on the rooftops, and a cool breeze moved through the tall trees. Lena stepped out of her home with sleepy eyes, ready to begin her usual routine. But as soon as she walked near the forest path, she noticed something that made her stop immediately. There were footprints, many more than she had seen before. Some were small, but many were large, and all of them seemed to be going toward the deeper part of the forest. She bent down and looked closely at the prints. Some were fresh, and some looked like they had been made earlier. She placed her tiny hand near one of them and realized someone with a bigger foot had walked there recently. Lena felt a soft shiver of curiosity. The forest path was usually calm, and most days only a few villagers walked on it. But today, the ground looked like a group had passed through. She remembered the boy from yesterday, the limping child with the gentle smile. Her heart worried a little. Were these footprints from his family? Were they looking for him? She hoped that he had reached home safely after she helped him. As she picked up her clay pot to go toward the stream, she kept glancing back at the footprints. Something about them made her feel like a small story was growing quietly around her, and she didn't understand it yet. But the forest looked calm, so she took a deep breath and continued walking. The stream was peaceful as always. The water sparkled under the sunlight, and the gentle sound of flowing water comforted her. She filled her pot slowly and sat on a rock for a moment. Her thoughts returned again and again to the boy. She imagined him walking carefully, his foot wrapped with her scarf, trying his best to reach home. She hoped he was not alone. She hoped someone had greeted him with warmth and care when he arrived. After filling the pot, she walked back home. But as the day went on, more strange things began to happen. Around lunchtime, a group of villagers gathered near the large tree in the center of the village. They seemed worried, whispering among themselves. Lena saw them while passing by and stopped for a moment. One of the older men said he saw shadows moving in the forest early in the morning. Another woman said she heard low voices coming from the woods, though she couldn't understand the words. A young man added that he saw smoke rising from a place deep inside the forest, somewhere where villagers usually never went. Lena listened quietly, her heart beating a little faster. She wondered if it had something to do with the boy. She wanted to ask, but she was shy and decided to stay quiet. Instead, she walked back home slowly, thinking deeply. Her mother noticed her worried face right away. Lena tried to smile, but her mother gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Is something troubling you?" she asked softly. Lena hesitated but finally told her about the footprints she saw that morning, and how the villagers were speaking about strange sounds in the forest. Her mother listened carefully. After a moment, she said, "It might be people from a nearby tribe passing through. Sometimes they travel in groups. There is nothing to worry about. Just stay close to home for now." Her mother's words gave Lena some comfort, but deep inside she felt something unusual was happening, something connected to the boy she had helped. As the days slowly moved forward, the forest around the village seemed different. Birds suddenly flew out of the trees in large groups, as if frightened by something. Squirrels ran quickly across the branches, and even the quiet air felt like it carried something new, something unspoken. Lena's father, who rarely showed worry, came home earlier than usual. He had seen signs of movement in the forest and did not want his family to be alone if anything unusual happened. He didn't think there was danger, but he preferred being cautious. At sunset, the sky turned orange and purple, painting the whole village in warm colors. But the beauty of the evening felt different today. There was a quiet tension in the air, like everyone was waiting for something without knowing what it was. The villagers closed their doors earlier than usual, speaking softly to one another. As night approached, Lena sat near her window, hugging her knees. She kept thinking about the boy and the footprints. She remembered how his small hand felt when he held hers while trying to stand. She remembered the way he looked back several times before disappearing into the trees. She hoped he was safe and not in any trouble. Just then, she heard a soft sound outside. Not loud, not scary, just soft, like distant murmuring. She looked out the window and saw gentle lights moving far away in the forest. They were moving slowly, like small fireflies, though she knew they were not fireflies. They looked like torches being carried by people. She gasped quietly, her heart beating faster. Her father came to the window too. He watched for a long moment, and then slowly closed the wooden shutter. "Everyone should stay inside tonight," he said calmly. "Something is happening in the forest. Maybe travelers have come." Lena felt safe with her family, but her curiosity grew even stronger. She couldn't sleep easily. Even when she lay on her small bed, she kept listening carefully to every sound. At one point during the night, she heard a distant beat, a steady rhythmic sound, soft but clear. She didn't know what it was, but it felt like someone far away was sending a message through the air. The gentle beat continued for a few minutes, and then stopped, leaving a deep silence behind. Lena closed her eyes tightly, trying to fall asleep. But the silence made her imagination wander. She wondered if the people making those sounds were connected to the boy. She wondered if they were his family. Maybe they were searching for him. Maybe they were thankful someone had helped him. Slowly, she fell asleep with these thoughts circling in her mind. The next morning came with a quiet breeze. When Lena woke up, she felt a mix of peace and nervousness. Something told her this day would be different. Something deep in her heart whispered that the world outside her door would not be the same as yesterday. She got dressed and stepped outside. The village was unusually quiet. No children ran around. No one stood outside talking. Everyone stayed inside their homes, as if waiting for something important to happen. The forest looked calm, but Lena remembered the lights and the soft beats from the night before. She could still feel the mystery in the air. She walked a few steps toward the path but stopped when she heard a soft vibration beneath her feet, almost like heavy footsteps approaching from a distance. Her heart beat faster. She felt excitement, fear, and curiosity mixing together. She didn't know who was coming, but she knew it was connected to the events of the previous day. She prepared herself quietly, standing near her home. Little did she know that this would be the day when her small act of kindness would return to her in a way she could never have imagined. She had no idea that nearly 40 people were walking toward her village at that very moment. She had no idea they were coming because of her, and she didn't know that the boy she helped had told someone very important about her kindness. Within a short time, the whole village would witness something unforgettable, something that would start right in front of her home. The morning began with a deep and unusual silence that made Lena pause the moment she stepped outside. The air felt heavier than usual, and even the birds seemed quieter. It was as if the whole village was holding its breath, waiting for something that had not yet shown itself. Lena stood near her doorway, her small hands gripping the wooden frame as she looked toward the forest path. Her father also stepped out, quietly scanning the horizon. He frowned slightly, not out of fear, but because he sensed something important approaching. Lena stood close to him, trying to understand the strange feeling in the air. She didn't know what was coming, but something inside her told her that this day would be different from any other day. A light vibration ran through the ground, very gentle but noticeable. Lena looked down at her feet, and then at her father, who had felt it too. Her mother stepped outside next, wiping her hands on her apron, wondering why both of them were standing so still. Then, slowly, the distant sound of footsteps reached their ears. At first it was soft, like a faint drumbeat. But as the moments passed, it grew clearer. The sound was steady, rhythmic, and organized. It was not the sound of one or two people walking. It was the unmistakable sound of many feet moving together. Lena's eyes widened. She turned toward the forest, and soon she saw movement shadows stretching between the trees. As they came closer, the shapes became clearer. A long line of tall figures appeared, all walking in a calm and orderly way. The sunlight reflected on the beads and simple ornaments they wore. Their steps were slow but firm. The villagers began peeking from their windows and doors as the figures came closer to the village. Some whispered quietly, unsure what was happening. Others stood silently behind their doors, watching with wide eyes. No one felt threatened, but the large group entering the village was something they had never seen before. Within moments, nearly 40 native warriors stepped out from the forest and into the village clearing. They were not carrying anything frightening. Their expressions were calm, serious, and respectful. Their clothing was beautifully crafted from natural materials, and each figure carried themselves with quiet pride. Lena stood completely still, her heart beating fast. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Out of all the houses in the village, the group seemed to be walking directly toward hers. Her father took a slow step forward to stand in front of Lena and her mother, just in case. But he kept his posture relaxed, realizing that these visitors did not come with any anger. They walked peacefully, with purpose. The leader of the group stepped forward. He was taller than the others, with thoughtful eyes and calm features. When he reached the edge of their small yard, he stopped and placed his hand over his chest, a gesture that seemed respectful and meaningful. Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. Up close, she could see their calm faces more clearly. They were not here to harm anyone. They carried an air of gratitude, not sadness or anger. Then, from behind the leader, a small figure stepped forward. Lena's eyes immediately recognized him. It was the same boy she had helped the day before. His foot was still wrapped in the torn piece of her scarf. Seeing him again made her heart fill with warmth and relief. The boy's face lit up the moment he saw her. He hurried forward, though carefully, and stopped right in front of her. His eyes were full of gratitude. He lifted his foot slightly to show her the scarf still tied around it, then smiled a full, bright smile that he didn't have the day before. Lena felt tears of happiness gather in her eyes. She never expected to see him again, and certainly not like this. She had only helped him because he needed help. She never imagined that her small action would bring him back with nearly 40 people. The leader looked at Lena's father and spoke gently. Though his language was slightly different, they could understand his words. He explained that the boy Lena had helped was the son of their chief, the youngest child of an important family in their tribe. The boy had wandered too far from their camp the previous day and had hurt his foot. He tried to return home alone but struggled. The leader explained that the boy had shared everything that happened, how a small girl in the village had helped him, wrapped his injury, given him water, and stayed with him until he could walk again. The leader bowed his head slightly toward Lena in a gesture of deep respect. It was their way of showing appreciation for her kindness. Lena felt shy. She stepped a little behind her father, who gently encouraged her to come forward. The warriors watched her with warm expressions. They did not see her as just a small girl. They saw her as someone with great kindness. The boy walked closer to her and handed her a small wooden carving shaped like a bird. It was made from light wood, smooth and carefully designed. He placed it in her hand and smiled again. Lena looked at the carving with amazement. She knew it was special, something he must have carried with care. The leader stepped forward once more and pointed toward Lena's scarf around the boy's foot. He said that her scarf had helped the boy reach home safely. He told her family that the boy's father, the chief, was deeply thankful. That was why they had all come together. Not to scare anyone, but to show respect to the girl who helped one of their own. Lena's parents stood quietly, touched by the leader's words. They had always taught Lena to help others, even when she had very little. Seeing their daughter honored this way filled them with quiet pride. The warriors opened several baskets they carried with them. Inside were gifts made by their tribe, neatly woven blankets, carved wooden tools, dried fruits, seeds, and other useful items. They placed them gently on the ground in front of Lena's family. These gifts were not given casually. They were given with sincerity and appreciation. Lena watched in awe. She had never seen such beautifully crafted items before. But more than the gifts, it was the kindness and respect in their faces that touched her heart. She remembered how lonely and scared the boy looked the day before. Now he stood with his people, safe and smiling. The villagers, who had been watching quietly from behind their windows, slowly stepped outside. They were surprised to see how peaceful and respectful the visitors were. Some looked amazed that such a large group had come all because of one small girl. The leader then raised his hand toward the sky, said a few words that sounded like a blessing, and gently placed his hand on Lena's head. It was a gesture of honor. She stood still, her heart warm and full. She had never imagined that helping someone could lead to something so beautiful. After spending a short time with Lena's family, the warriors prepared to leave. The boy waved at Lena with a joyful smile, and she waved back shyly but happily. The leader bowed once more before leading the group back toward the forest. As they walked away, the entire village watched in silence and wonder. Lena stood at her doorstep long after they disappeared into the trees. She held the small wooden bird tightly in her hand. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Her mother gently hugged her from the side. None of them spoke for a while. They didn't need words. They all understood that something extraordinary had happened. That morning, Lena had learned something important, something she would remember all her life. Sometimes, even the smallest act of kindness can return to you in ways you never expect, touching many lives along the way. After the long line of visitors disappeared into the forest, the village slowly returned to its usual quietness. But nothing felt the same anymore. The air seemed lighter, and the village felt warmer, as if something magical had passed through it. Lena still stood near her doorway, holding the small wooden bird tightly in her hand. Her thoughts were full of wonder. She could not believe that so many people had come to thank her because she helped one injured child. Her parents were just as amazed. They kept looking at the gifts that the visitors had left: the woven blankets with colorful patterns, the small baskets filled with fruits and seeds, and the handmade tools that looked strong and beautifully carved. Her mother gently ran her fingers over the soft blankets, admiring the work. Her father lifted one of the wooden tools and examined it carefully, feeling the smooth surface and admiring the talent that had made it. Lena watched them with a soft smile. But what touched her most was the feeling in her heart. She didn't care much about the gifts, though she appreciated them. What mattered more was knowing that the boy she helped was safe. Seeing him smile earlier made her feel a kind of happiness she had never felt before. As the morning passed, the villagers gathered slowly around Lena's home. They came one by one, some standing quietly, others whispering softly in amazement. They had seen everything: the peaceful arrival of the warriors, the gifts they brought, and the gentle respect they showed Lena. The villagers had never witnessed something like that, and many of them couldn't stop talking about it. An older woman from the village walked up to Lena with gentle eyes. "Child," she said kindly, "you brought honor to our small village today. Your kindness brought kindness back." Lena didn't know what to say. She simply nodded with a shy smile. A few children ran toward her, excited and full of questions. "Lina, were you scared?" one girl asked. Another boy asked, "Did you really help the chief's son?" Lena felt shy with all the attention, but she answered softly, "He needed help, so I helped him," she said, her voice simple and honest. The children listened to her with awe, as if she had done something heroic. But Lena didn't feel like a hero. She felt like she had just done what anyone should do when they see someone in need. Her father noticed how many people had gathered and guided Lena gently back inside so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Inside their small home, her mother had already placed the gifts neatly on a mat. The house looked brighter, filled with new colors and textures they had never owned before. They all sat together on the floor, quietly taking in the moment. After a while, Lena's father spoke softly. "Lena," he said, "your heart is pure. You helped someone without expecting anything. That is something many people forget to do." His voice was full of pride. Her mother gently touched Lena's cheek and added, "Kindness is never wasted. You gave a small act of help, and it returned in a beautiful way." Lena looked down at the wooden bird in her hand. Its wings were carved with delicate lines, and its hollow center made it light to hold. She wondered if the boy carried it with him every day. Maybe it was something special to him, and now he had given it to her. That thought made her heart warm. For the rest of the day, the village remained peaceful. People continued to stop by Lena's home, some offering warm words, others simply wanting to see the gifts. But as the sun slowly began to set, the crowd disappeared, back into their own homes, and the quietness returned. Lena stepped outside again and sat on the small wooden step in front of her house. She watched the sky turn shades of orange and gold. The trees glowed softly under the evening light, and the forest looked calm and safe again. With the wooden bird resting beside her, Lena thought about everything that had happened. She remembered how scared the boy looked yesterday, the gentle look in his eyes today, and the kindness of the leader who placed his hand on her head. She remembered the moment when the boy hugged her tightly, his small gesture full of gratitude. She closed her eyes and imagined him returning to his family, telling them about her. She hoped he was happy and recovering well. Her mother stepped out and sat beside her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Lena leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm thinking about him," she admitted. "He was alone and hurt. Maybe he was scared. I'm glad I helped him." Her mother nodded gently. "Sometimes," she said, "helping someone seems small at the moment, but the heart remembers it forever." Later that night, the family gathered for dinner. Their meal was simple as always, but tonight it felt different. There was a calm happiness around them. Even the candlelight seemed to flicker more warmly than usual. After dinner, Lena placed the wooden bird beside her pillow. She fell asleep thinking about kindness, gratitude, and the surprising beauty that had unfolded in her life. The next morning, the village woke with a new sense of peace. The forest, which had felt mysterious and full of unknown movement the past few days, now looked warm and friendly again. Birds flew freely, and the sunlight filtered through the branches in soft beams. When Lena stepped outside, she saw two young villagers painting a picture of the scene from the previous day. A line of visitors, the small girl stepping forward, and the peaceful exchange of gifts. They wanted to preserve the memory so the story could be told to future generations. Throughout the day, villagers continued speaking about what had happened. Some said they had never seen such a respectful group of visitors. Others talked about how kindness could create bridges between different people. Everyone seemed to agree that Lena had done something special. But Lena didn't think about being special. She thought about doing what was right. She thought about how important it was to notice someone who needed help, and to act without hesitation. A few days later, something wonderful happened. The seeds that the visitors had gifted to her family were planted in the village garden. They grew quickly, sprouting into healthy plants with colorful leaves. The villagers called them Lena's seeds of kindness, believing they symbolized the goodness that had grown from her simple act. Children began playing near Lena's home more often. Inspired by her story, they practiced helping each other, sharing small things, and offering warmth, even in tiny ways. Some would leave flowers at Lena's door, saying they wanted to spread kindness just like she did. Months passed, and the story of Lena spread beyond the village. Travelers who visited the area heard about the little girl who helped a child without asking for anything in return. The story moved from village to village, told by people who admired the courage and heart of a young girl who showed that even a small act could touch many lives. Years later, whenever people in the village spoke about the event, they remembered it not for the gifts or the large group of visitors, but for the goodness in a tiny girl's heart. They remembered her kindness, her courage, and her pure intention. Lena grew older, but she never forgot the boy, the wooden bird, or the moment when 40 peaceful visitors walked into her life. She carried the memory with her, always, and whenever she looked at the wooden bird, she was reminded that kindness has a way of returning, often at the most unexpected time and in the most beautiful way. And so, her story lived on a gentle reminder to everyone that even the smallest act of goodness can create a wave of warmth that touches hearts far beyond what anyone could imagine.